Southwest Florida's newest game in town brings you all the NFL action that you're asking for. Lloyd and Kevin have all the news, updates, trades, and rumors from the NFL. Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 102.9 The Game starts now.
Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back for another week on 102.9 The Game and the Coast Sports Network. So glad everybody can be with us this evening. I'm here with my tag team partner. Kevin Midgette is back from assignment, and I know he is ready to talk about some week 3. What a week around the National Football League. And the thing is, Kevin, so many upsets. You know, I counted 7 underdog teams that were outright winners. So the Giants, Minnesota Vikings, the Eagles, Denver, Packers, Panthers, and the Rams. So it just shows you it's any given Sunday around the National Football League. And you know, these teams they're going to fight to the end. Right now, there's only one team that's 0-3, and there's probably going to be about 5 teams that are 3-0. But what are you seeing this time of year in the season, and can we take anything from these first couple weeks, or do we need to have more in this picture?
We've talked about before. First of all, glad to be back, by the way. We got a lot to get into. Let's get cracking on this. There's one thing we were talking about is the first 4 weeks of the season, you don't know who's what. People with their draft, how well they did, free agent signings. And there's a lot of notoriety that goes on how they played last year. It's not the same team as they had last year. Just like the teams that were bad last year wasn't the same team they had last year. And I just want to put it out there, myself included, I think we have to put some respect on the Minnesota Vikings name right now. And Sam Darnold, a USC quarterback, I'm fully aware.
Yeah, it's crazy because, you know, I thought the same thing. You know, I thought some of these teams were kind of fraudulent. Last week, Nate and I played a game. We were talking about fraud, not a fraud. And some of these teams we thought were frauds, they've kind of stepped up and they said, you know what, my season's not over yet. And we know from past history, teams that are 1-2 can still make some noise in the playoffs. There's so much parity in the league. Last year, the Eagles were the last undefeated team. I think it only took until week 6 until everybody got a win. So, you know, got a loss as well. So it's a situation where no one's going to be a 72 Dolphins anymore. No one's going to go undefeated. You just don't, you know, we're still feeling this thing out because the visiting teams right now are 8-6 this week. Last week, visiting teams were 10-6. Week 1 may have been an aberration. Home teams were 10-6. So there's no real clear advantage home field right now. And everybody is just coming out there giving the best. Now, one of the games I wanted to start with, you know, you and I go local. We're in the Philadelphia area. And I wanted to touch on the Philadelphia Eagles game. Got a lot of calls from relatives and fans of the team talking about the Eagles. They won. It was 15-12, but there's some things that kind of you're like, all right, there were some good, there's some bad. They lead the NFC East. We'll get into the other teams in that division in a minute, but what are you seeing with the Eagles, and how did you feel after that Eagles victory over the Saints?
I felt with the Eagles win, I felt more like, okay, because you're expecting a loss at a certain point. And I'm just going to throw it out there. Most of the gambling public had the over in that game. So 3-0 at halftime was, I mean, everyone was just like, all right, that parlay's done right there. You go to looking at, we'll get into Nick Sirianni, I'm sure, but this guy's the second coming of Rich Kotite as I've ever seen as a Philadelphia Eagles coach. He's going to be remembered, all right. It's not going to be in a good way, but he's going to be remembered. He's Generation Z's Rich Kotite.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think his record right now is about 30. It's 36-18 at this point. You know, he's had a modicum of success, but I think he's kind of leaning on that 2022 season where the Philadelphia Eagles made the Super Bowl and everything came together. But in terms of X's and O's, you're right. There were a lot of key game situations, and you're like, what is he doing? You know, putting his team in these bad situations, and it's glove in hand. We talk about all the time. We'll start with Sirianni. But Jalen Hurts is not the same quarterback he was when he had Shane Steichen. Steichen's now the head coach of the Colts. And the biggest problem with Jalen Hurts I'm seeing is giveaways. I mean, he's got 26 giveaways since Shane Steichen left him. And he's leading one of the leading guys in the turnovers. He has 6 interceptions, I believe, already this season. So in terms of Sirianni, I thought the biggest things were the fourth downs, kind of head scratchers. We'll start there. The Eagles just kept going for it on fourth down in situations where they shouldn't have. Particularly before the half, they went for it. They were 1 and 3 on fourth downs. And then the crazy thing was the special teams. He's got to get that together. They went for a 60-yard field goal. Come on. They're not going to make that. Yeah, in 2017, they made the miracle kick to beat, I think, the Giants. But you're not going to see a long field goal like that. And then they had the block punt where Nolan Smith, another guy you got to question the drafting of him. He's a first-round pick. He misses the block. They get the punt block. But talk to me about Sirianni and his decisions.
I think you're looking at a guy trying to do too much right now. He's trying to prove too much. Let's be honest. He doesn't got a lot of say on that team. He's not really calling the plays. He's not drafting the players. He's in no man's land. He knows he's on a lame duck contract right now, that if he doesn't do well, he's out the door. And if you think about it, he's probably not going to get another head coaching job after this. I don't know if he'd even be hired as a coordinator at this point. He'd have to either be a quarterback coach or go to a college football team if he wanted to head coach again. So with that being said, he's making the wrong choices when he gets a chance to. Look at the Buffalo Bills tonight. What'd they do? They scored a touchdown. Extra point gets blocked. They come down and get a touchdown. What did McDermott do? He kicked the extra point. He didn't try to get 2 right there, try to get the points back. He's on the road. Take the points. It's like, take the points whenever you can, and this guy just won't do it.
Yeah, he's overthinking. And as you said, he wants to prove he's in that ilk of all the coaches. He did make a Super Bowl, yes, but there's been some other coaches that made Super Bowls, even won a Super Bowl, that you're like, no, I wouldn't want that guy coaching my team. Particularly, I think about like Barry Switzer. Or, I think of George Seifert. He made the Super Bowl, and there's just, you have to be a leader of men. And when I look at this Eagles team, I just see, they're just kind of undisciplined at times. They're not on the same script, and you just wonder what's going on here. And as you said, a big thing was they got rid of both coordinators last year. They pointed the finger at Brian Johnson and Desai, the defensive coordinator, and kicked them out the door. But you have to wonder, is Kellen Moore running this? And it always seems like Sirianni's quick to point the finger. Well, that was my call. It was Kellen's. And then defensively, though, I do got to tip my cap to what Fangio and the defense did against the Saints. Played a tremendous game, holding them to only 12 points. They know they had 91 points going into this game, one of the highest in NFL history, and they did a great job. Particularly Jalen Carter was one of the highest rated defensive tackles in the NFL, and he was all over the place. Zach Bond had 13 tackles. So talk to me about the defense and what you're seeing there, and then we'll get into the two heroes of the game, Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley.
It's another one of those situations where were the Saints really that good? They beat a horrible, horrible Carolina team. Dallas doesn't look that great right now. So it's like, were they that good? Or is the Eagles defense, did they step up? Are they playing where they need to? I mean, there's a lot of things. At the end of the day, you got to get pressure on the quarterback. And that's where they're going to lack, especially if the defensive secondary gets more beat up than it is now. They're going to have issues, like you said earlier, with injuries on the offensive and defensive side. You're going to have to struggle here for a few weeks, definitely to band-aid everything together. And they need that bye week already more than any other team that I've seen.
Yeah, Kevin, it's crazy because when you and I looked at the schedule, you're like, oh, the Eagles have an early bye, week 5. Is that a little too early? You don't want to lose momentum. But the thing was, they need to bye badly. They have a lot of injuries, particularly, they lost Lane Johnson, concussion. Mekhi Becton got hurt on their offensive line with a finger injury, so their offensive line was very beat up. And then they didn't have A.J. Brown to begin with in terms he has a hamstring injury that's really lingering. And you know how that can be for receivers. So the heroes, though, offensively, you have to tip your cap to Saquon Barkley, 17 rushes, 174 yards, 2 touchdowns. The one was just electric, 65-yard run where he just, outran everybody. Looked like his old Penn State and his first season at the Giants there. But we were talking off air before we started. You have to wonder about injuries with Saquon Barkley. He's only played 14 games a couple times in his career, and the Eagles are really leaning on him. Do you think he can keep up this pace?
I think he can to a certain amount of time. We talked about it, I think even a month ago. You want this guy to be fresh at the end of the season. I mean, he's leaving the Giants with a bad offensive line. He's like, all right, I don't have to sit there and carry the mail once again for the whole time, like 25, 30 carries. He comes to Philadelphia, it's like, oh, wait a minute, let me put my postal carrier hat on. Yeah, I have to do this again. And it's a situation where if this guy starts getting banged up towards the back end of the season, now you're in trouble once again because Kenny Gainwell is going to get more carries at that point. But I will say the one thing, though, it's nice for the Eagles to have a running back that's a home run hitter. I don't believe they've really had that since Brian Westbrook. Someone who can take the ball and go 65 yards. So that helped a ton.
Yeah, I haven't seen that a lot since Charlie Gardner. He's somebody could break containment, take it to the house. And you're right, that breakaway speed is huge, and it just helps the Eagles in terms of they finally maybe have solved the running back situation since Shady retired. So we'll see how this works out. The other guy got tippy cap to, and I don't know if this was happenstance or who was calling plays, but they really got Dallas Goedert involved in this game. 10 catches, 170 yards. He was just amazing. The biggest play, obviously, of the game is he saved their bacon because it was late in the game. The Saints had taken the lead, and it was a little dump off where three Saints they kind of ran into each other. My son was saying that, and then Goddard just took off down the sideline. So just talk a little bit about Goddard, and do you think he's going to become a staple in the offense because they really need him right now with all these injuries?
Lloyd, he should have been a staple of the offense the last 2 years. They held him in a lot to block. I'm fully aware of that. He's got hands. He can catch the ball. You're down receivers. And go back to that Atlanta game. Calcaterra, Covey is getting the ball to him. It's like, feature Dallas Goedert. Utilize that. And so if they finally use him, and hey, what do you know? It worked. Hey, try it again next week.
Yeah, because, and it's interesting because tight ends are kind of down this season. You and I are fantasy football guys, and the tight ends, there's really been no breakout guys, and that was a huge performance. And I know a lot of people are trying to probably hit the waiver wire to grab him and get him on their team. So we're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coastal Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette, and around 8:15 or so, we're going to bring on Jeff Little. He's from the LA sports scene, a guy I've known for a number of years, and we wanted to get his take, in particularly on the Chargers, the Rams, and of course, Kevin's favorite quarterback from out that way, USC. So I know over the years Jeff has covered a lot of this talk, and we'll bring him in a minute. One other thing before we get to Jeff. You talked about the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, the Minnesota Vikings, what an effort. As you said, 34-7. They crushed the Texans. This is a game where, somebody's has to go. And, they did it. They played well. And the thing is, Sam Darnold, a lot of people may have to apologize to him because they thought he was done. And he's looking like he might be the next Baker Mayfield or whomever you want to insert there, maybe he's got a fairy tale ending coming. But what are you thinking in terms of Minnesota Vikings?
I think we're going to see a big, huge situation of these guys being drafted, sitting for another year or two, instead of throwing him into the mix. You saw with Baker, you see with Sam Darnold and other guys. It's like the guys being drafted do not seem like they are ready to step in. I mean, that's a lot. You give a kid who's 21, 22 years old, here's the keys to the car. Go ahead and drive it, What's better? Let him sit for a year or two. Let him learn. Two quarterbacks, and I've brought it up before, come to mind that got beat up so bad because they had horrible offensive lines and they were forced to play right away was David Carr and Tim Couch. Those guys got so beat up, they weren't the same. They couldn't even progress to the maturation process. Look at Bryce Young with Carolina right now.
Yeah.
Bryce Young had the worst week ever. He lost his job to Andy Dalton. And by the way, tell me you stink when you don't really stink. Andy Dalton's taking your job. Yeah, you stink. And
Yeah.
then, not only that, Tyrese Maxey takes his girlfriend, and it's on national TV at the Falcons Eagles game that
Oh,
same
jeez.
week. That's a bad week for Bryce
Yeah, I didn't
Young.
even know that
Bad week.
part. Entertainment tonight right there. All right, so we're going to bring Jeff in, talking about entertainment tonight and these young athletes and all that. He's out in L.A. and boots on the ground there in the L.A. Scene. So bring Jeff up, and then we'll get cracking with him and talk about what's going on out there with the Rams and Chargers and all the other fun stuff. So punch him up, Angel. Yep. Jeff,
Oh,
you got your video up?
looks like it's up. Let's see here.
Yeah, hit the camera.
No. What's that? About why is it? Why do I have an X?
All
There
right.
we go. Well,
All right. Well, we're good. Yeah, we can't see it. Anyway, it's all right. So, Jeff, talk to me a little bit about it. There was a huge game yesterday in California in terms of the NFC West. The Rams overcame the Niners 27-24. Huge win for them. Lots of injuries for the Rams. And it was a back and forth game, and Stafford just kind of willed his team to victory. What were you seeing in terms of the Rams and the Niners there?
huge win for the Rams. We're talking about an epic win. You figure you come back from a double-digit deficit to kind of stun a division opponent. By the way, their second win against the Rams, against the 49ers in a row now. That's a huge thing. This team was literally written off. You're talking about the top two wide receivers gone, at least three offensive linemen down. They were written off. I think they were down, favored to lose by 6.5, I believe it was. Outproduced dramatically by the 49ers. 49ers had something like 425 as far as total offense, where the Rams were 296. You're talking about time of possession in favor of the 49ers. Everything looked like first downs, 25 to I think it was 19. Everything said 49ers should win this game. One turnover kind of changed the whole game. Oh, and let's not forget Kyron Williams and his 3 touchdowns. It really changed everything. But the team showed a lot of grit coming back. And talking about tremendous character. Kind of like what my team showed last week, but didn't show up again at all this week. But interesting, I got to give the Rams credit, but they really won this game by outscoring the 49ers 13-3 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. And Kevin, go ahead. I think you have a question on. Kevin's he's not really a USC quarterback fan. So what do you got in terms of what do you have a question on there, Kevin? Go ahead.
The one thing I do have to say is, once again, I have to tip my cap now because Sam Darnold's making me eat my words. But it is one of those things. USC seems to have the high-profile quarterbacks that come out, and when they get to the NFL, it just doesn't seem to go as well. Carson Palmer was a success story, I'll put it that way. But then you have your Barkleys and your Leinerts and everything else. And do you think, my question is then, is it the location, the USC status that gets him this hype, or is it the actual ability and it's not translating well to the NFL?
Wow. Excellent question and excellent statement. I have to agree with you 100%. You're out here in Cali, you're watching the team, you're seeing them perform well, you're assuming they can look good on the college stage, they can ramp it up to the NFL level. Not the same. I'm not sure what it is. I can't really put my finger on it, but if I had to say, it's a matter of the guys come in. It's kind of like something that kind of reminds me a lot of what Tom Brady said in terms of how you have a guy that comes in and learns the playbook, but not necessarily the program. I'm asking the question of, are you actually teaching these guys how to read coverages? Trying to find out exactly what the defense is trying to do to you, and so therefore you know where you should be going with the football. I just don't see it. But now Sam Darnold, he's not only shocked you, Kevin, he shocked everybody. I mean, no one's expected what we've seen from Sam Darnold, but again, the guy just pulled off of the trash heap, and he's showing that he can still play this game. But as far as the rest of USC quarterbacks, I don't know. But you really have to go back further than Carson Palmer to see any sort of success. Dare I say Rodney Peete, maybe? But it's not a lot of guys coming from SC is playing quarterback that had a lot of success. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's really a matter of not. I hate to say it because it sounds like I'm above it all. I don't want to sound like that, but it does sound like the guys are kind of confused as far as how to read coverages. They seem lost.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, Jeff, is they're playing with 5-star guys usually. They have usually some high-end receivers coming out of USC, and I think it's kind of easy to throw the football up to those guys. And we're here talking with Jeff Little here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coastal Sports Network. Jeff is out in LA. He works for Sports Journey. He and I used to do some work together there. You can find him on X at Jeff Little 32. Jeff, I wanted to get your take on, we were talking about, right before you came on, a California kid, Bryce Young, number 1 overall pick. He loses his job. Andy Dalton comes on 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, the only quarterback this season to do that. What are we thinking in terms of Bryce Young? Is he salvageable, or is this situation he's the next Jamarcus Russell?
Wow. You know what? I hate to say it, but he looks like a little kid out there. I mean, in terms of overall size, all these guys, it's like you kind of cringe when anybody breaks the line of scrimmage. You're like, oh, somebody blocked that dude. It's a situation, I think, honestly, it's hard to – I want to give everybody a shot and say the guy is salvageable. I think maybe if you get in the right situation, possibly. But when you look at other quarterbacks, some of his size, I'll throw some random guys out there, like a Kyler Murray. Maybe even I'll go back to a Doug Flutie. He looks smaller than both of those guys. And those guys were small guys. It's just a matter of you got to find a way to be able to get the rock off in terms of making those throws with those guys around you. And it's almost impossible at his size. So I'm not sure what can be done. I do feel that he still has a future in this league. Exactly where it is, I know for a fact it's not going to be in Carolina. I think Carolina has some issues, as long as they're not playing the Raiders every weekend. But I think that's a situation where he needs a change of pace. But I think it's part of the problem is the organization, because when you draft a guy number 1 overall, he's a rookie quarterback. You got to be able to find a way to live with the growing pains. That development is not going to happen unless you give that guy a tremendous amount of leash. And I don't think they've actually done that yet. So I think that's where the conundrum really is with them. But, wow, I think if he could land somewhere else, and it might be a situation where maybe not in 2024 or 2025, but maybe like a Sam Darnold, he might come off the trash heap a couple of years later and show what he can do. But I guarantee that will not be in Carolina.
Yeah. Kevin, you got another one? Yeah.
I think he's absolutely correct on that. I mean, nothing's going to happen with him at Carolina. Carolina has so much to do, and if they're already pulling him at this point, we're in week 3, and they took the guy out of the game already. Didn't let him start. I mean, it's not going to happen for him there. And Jeff, we were talking about it earlier. My point was that basically these guys being drafted now, I think they're going to start to sit him for a year or two and let the maturation process begin, because these guys go in there, they're just getting hit left and right. And chances are it's a really bad team that's drafting you, and their offensive line probably isn't that good. So I think it benefits these guys to sit maybe for a year or two, even though the money you're spending.
It does. There's no doubt about that. Look at a guy like, I remember I had a friend of mine, he kind of wants to play the role of my antagonist every now and then, but he was a little upset with me for saying in the draft most recently that it was a bit of a mistake for Atlanta to draft Michael Penix. Now, part of that statement was the fact that I wanted the Raiders to draft Michael Penix, saw him flying off the board. I was a little upset about that, but another statement is a matter of if you draft a quarterback number 1 overall, I shouldn't say number 1 overall, but in the first round, he's literally your quarterback of the future. But you gave $150 million to Kirk Cousins, so clearly Kirk Cousins is going to be there for at least 2 years. So you got a starter in waiting in Michael Penix. I think he's going to be ready whenever his time comes up. But that's like a perfect situation. To your point, if you draft a quarterback in the first round, the first 6 picks in the draft this year were all quarterbacks. You can see every last one of them struggling. A lot of people, well, except for Jaden Daniels, think he's doing an outstanding job. We'll be seeing him later on this evening as well. I think all these young quarterbacks are going to struggle for the fact that they're being thrust into the limelight right away. And to your point, Kevin, which is outstanding, they need time to develop and grow. This is just a tough – you can't throw them into the Lions and expect them to go ahead and hit the ground running. Very rare to see a rookie hit the ground running like that. That's just very tough. It's a high bar to have these guys measure up to do it that way. However, if you give the guys time, a la dare I say, Green Bay, how Green Bay has always done this in terms of they'll draft a quarterback when they really don't need a quarterback. That guy has at least 1 or 2 years to sit and develop and grow. So by the time the guy hits the field, we're like, oh my God, look at that guy. He's done that. He looks good because he's had time to grow. He wasn't thrown to the lions right away.
Yeah, and a big thing is a lot of these guys they're overdrafted.
Yes.
And you get these owners that they're impatient and they want to get that shiny new toy out there. A lot of times these guys are Heisman Trophy winners or they looked great in college. But as you said, the game is so different in the NFL. The windows are tighter. And all the quarterbacks I talked to over the years from my work on Third and a Mile and other things, they talked about it was just a huge jump in a learning curve from college to the NFL. And a lot of them needed that time. And they may have flamed out the first place they were at. And they're considered it right away like, oh, he's a savior. Let him get in there, and he's going to be able to take this team that was terrible and get them to new heights. Now, it's not going to be like what happened with Purdy. Purdy is a quarterback. He was lucky enough. He was 7th round pick. Nobody had any expectations, but he had a ready-made roster around him. So
correct.
Yeah. And we're talking with Jeff Little here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Jeff, I wanted to get your take on the LA Chargers. I know they had a tough one. They lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers 20-10. But just talk about what Harbaugh's done there, and do you think it's sustainable? I saw they had injuries to John Alt and some other guys yesterday.
Yeah, I think it is sustainable because what he's basically having them do is like take all the frills out of it. Let's get back to hard-nosed football and running the football. To me, I'm old school, so I love seeing the running game. I have no problem with the passing game, but I do know if you can run the football, it is sustainable. A big thing is I went to the very first game. It was the first game of the year, Chargers Raiders, and of course it was great for me to see that game. Went there with my nephew. My nephew happens to be a Chargers fan, so I said, okay, we're going to watch this game together. We're going to have a good time. Now, my entire goal was to break out the binoculars. I really wanted to see one matchup. I wanted to see John Old against Max Crosby. I wanted to see that matchup specifically. Regardless of what happened, little caveat, I am a lifelong Raiders fan, so of course I had my little inkling one way or the other, but I have to give John Alt credit. I watched 9 specific occasions where they matched up, and dude held his own. As a first-round rookie, he held his own and looked very good. Unfortunately, he sprained his MCL. He's going to be out for a little while. How long, I don't know, but I think that guy is very solid. I think he even outplayed Slater on the other side, who's the starting left tackle. But really right now what's going on with Harbaugh, he's trying to reel these guys in. There's, in my opinion, this is one man's opinion, by the way, they should still be in San Diego. They chose to move up 2 hours to get to LA they went for the cash flow, if you will, so that's why they're here. But he's trying to get them to play solid football and not trying to blow every team out with the 30 or 40 or 50 times passing the football. Just basically running the football and mixing in the passing game. Therefore, by controlling how many times Justin Herbert throws, you're kind of making him look like a night and day better quarterback because you're kind of limiting how many times he throws. I think what's going to end up happening, as long as they can stay healthy, they're probably anywhere between 8 and 10 win team. But the way they play the game, they have to play clean. They have to not turn the football over and obviously not make mistakes. If they can do that, they have a pretty sustainable situation, whereas they can, again, possibly challenge for a wild card playoff spot. And I can't even believe I'm saying that, but it is a possibility if they can actually play clean.
Yeah. All right, Kevin, I'll let you have the last question here with Jeff. And we're talking with Jeff Little here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Again, follow his work at Sports Journey. Also on X at Jeff Little 32.
First, I would like to point out the fact that was a great call about Rodney Peete. Not only did he win a playoff game for the Eagles, I mean, let's be honest, the guy married Holly Robinson. So Rodney Pete's always a fan. I'm a fan of his. I got to throw that out there. I got to give him credit where credit's due.
Very true.
Also thrown out there with the Chargers, though, I think Harbaugh's he's playing to his strengths right now. He doesn't have the receiving core, even though Johnson was a high draft pick, and you got Ladd McConkey and Palmer healthy and everything else is a question mark sometimes. If with the receivers he has to run the ball. He realizes this, plays defense. My thing is with them is like you have the Baltimore, basically, the old IR Baltimore guys with
Correct.
Edwards and, Dobbins. But if he can do that, they're a fringe playoff team. They just can't play. They have a small room for error, which you were correct in saying. So I actually like Herbert, and I think making him, just make not 30, 40 passes a game, make him like 25 passes a game. I think you're helping Justin Herbert in that situation.
Completely. That's to me that's a recipe for success for them. Now, going back to that first game of the year, it was a very, very ugly game being the first game of the year. Kind of expect no one's really hitting on all cylinders at that point in time. It's game one. Now, the funniest thing, I had a guy next to me in the stand. Dude's like, I kid you not, this is the fourth play of the game, fourth play of the year, fourth play of the season. This dude's throwing his hat down, he's screaming and cursing. I'm like, dude, it's the fourth play of the year. I was like, we might get there down the road, but dude, it's play number 4. I was like, wait a minute. But again, that's Raider fans sometimes. But I'll put it this way. If this team can somehow sustain, which is a tough thing to do with all the injuries, of course, you mentioned no receivers. I did joke with my nephew saying that, I guess, Quentin Johnson, Ward number 1. I wanted to find out if that was like the number of catches he's going to have that day or how many catches he's going to have the entire season. Because the guy dropped a lot of passes that came right at him. It's more so, instead of catching the ball in his hand, he was more of a body catcher. So it seems like they're working with him. It sounds strange when you have a wide receiver that you draft in the first round, you have to teach this dude how to catch the ball with his hands. That seems awful strange to me, but I wish the kid well. I think, he's gotten this far. He's in the league. He should be able to develop. To what, I don't know, but I wish that guy well. But I think it's really a matter of when the team kind of bought into what Harbaugh's doing. Harbaugh's a grinder. So it takes about 2 or 3 years for a lot of times. Some people may tune out his message, but he's a solid football coach. If you listen to the guy and follow his direction, you're going to be fine. But I think that he's got to get these the defensive players, solid defense, get everybody healthy. If they could ever have Joey Bosa healthy next to Khalil Mack, that'll be phenomenal. Now, Derwin James, he's out because I think yet another kind of questionable hit. He's going to actually miss the 9/29 game against Kansas City, which really sucks for them. Might help me out, help my team out, but he's missing the game because of like an unnecessary tackle. It's one thing to go in and put a nice good lick on someone. If it's kind of close to the edge of the whistle, you got to pull up, and you shouldn't be saying it about a guy who's been in the league for enough years to know that some of the hits like this are not necessary. But between the injuries and actually just hanging in there, it's like this one thing I got to bring up again about that first game. J.K. Dobbins had 135 yards rushing. He literally had 3 rushes for 115 yards. And what I noticed was obviously some of the linebackers, specifically one, hate to throw the guy out there, but one guy who ended up missing a few tackles, he was in the wrong spot for the run fits, but 3 rushes for 115 yards. You take those 3 rushes away, it's a pretty good chance that game goes a different way. That's what I mean by as far as the Chargers have to play clean. No mistakes, no turnovers, and if they can do that, they're in the game. Obviously, you saw the game against Pittsburgh. I had no idea who was going to win that game. I thought it was a matter of a battle of attrition to see who was going to win that game anyway. But lo and behold, Pittsburgh came out the winner. But I got a question for everybody in the panel here. What do you guys think are like the 2 biggest shockers of the week as far as the NFL is concerned?
Yeah, I think, Jeff, the biggest thing I was telling Kevin before he came on, there were 7 underdog teams that were outright winners. So, you talk about the Giants, you talk about Minnesota, all these guys were underdogs, and they came to play and then got huge wins. So my big story of the weekend was all the underdog victories, including the Carolina Panthers. I know you don't want to talk about that one.
Oh, it's painful.
Go ahead, Kevin.
It hurts.
The one thing I'll have to throw out, once again, Cleveland's just terrible. They might get Nick Chubb back in a couple of weeks. I don't think it's going to matter unless they run the ball 30 times a game. If you let Deshaun Watson throw the ball, they're not going to be able to do anything. And everyone else has said it, and I'm just throwing my hat in the ring with it too. Deshaun Watson's contract will go down as the worst contract in NFL history to this point. To this point. Also, the fact Dallas, once again, Baltimore had to win that game. They were 0-2. They couldn't go 0-3. Yeah. Dallas, we don't really know what we have with them. I think we have an idea. But Dak's walking through the tunnel on the way out, and it was just like, he just kind of mumbled, jump off the bus if you want kind of thing. He didn't yell it. It was almost like, and then he's patting guys on the back. He's like, Dak's hurt. Dak's feelings are hurt right now. And yes. I don't know, that Dallas team might struggle to win 9 games at this point.
Completely agree. It always amazes me. I happen to live around several Dallas fans. I have no idea why, but at any rate, what amazes me is the faith in this team and the faith in Dak Prescott. I felt that Prescott was going to get paid, and I'm actually elated he was paid, and I'm elated for the fact that a lot of analysts, a lot of pundits kept saying over and over again, the Raiders need to go and give that guy $60 million a year because they need a quarterback. Well, my problem is they may need a quarterback, but at this point in time, I'm kind of in a small lane here. But I figure if you got a 6-year veteran Gardner Minshew and you got him battling with a rookie, and the rookie looks better, far more accurate, and reads coverage a little better, I'm going to roll with the rookie. But since the team decided to go with Gardner Minshew, I can deal with Gardner Minshew. He just reminds me, I call the guy gunslinger without a gun. He can make all the throws. He's chucking it around the field. He's just not the most accurate with it, and he just doesn't throw that great of a deep ball. Even though he did have, I think, at least 2 so far this season to Trey Tucker.
Yeah, and Minshew's, that was a head scratcher. I think the Raiders eventually may go for a Shador Sanders or yours coming out of Texas, somebody like that coming out in this draft. But we definitely appreciate Jeff Little jumping on from Sports Journey. Again, follow him on X, Jeff Little 32, and we'll have you on later in the season. Great insight, Jeff.
Well, I look forward to it. I enjoy it, and I got to give everybody a shout out. Definitely, thanks for having me on. I hope to be on again, as you mentioned. But my man Kevin, hey, I'm always down with the hat backwards guy, man. And plus, without a shadow of a doubt, I got to see as far I bounce, the flag in the back, ex-military myself. Much love.
All right, Jeff.
Right
we
back
appreciate you, man.
All right, take care, fellas.
Right. All right, that was Jeff. That was Jeff Little. Good stuff. Insight from him. He's out there in California. And I always like to get different opinions from around the country and people what they're seeing. But it's great. He's a long-suffering Raiders fan, unfortunately for him. So we're here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1 and 2.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. We're going to go around the league now about talk about all the games, and then we'll get you ready for next week, week 4. And as we said, it's starting to be separation time around the National Football League. So we'll just start talking about these games, and I'll get Kevin's take on it and chime in myself. Thursday night. Now, this was an interesting one. The New York Jets, they get to 2-1. They just beat the doors off of the Patriots 24-3. And the thing was, the Patriots won week 1, and you're like, Cincinnati, how did you lose to them? The Jets dominated this game. We saw Rodgers start moving around. I'm starting to feel good about picking them as a potential wild card team. What are we seeing with the Jets after that win?
Well, I will say definitely because we knew it was going to take Aaron Rodgers a few games. I mean, it's been a year and a few games since he's really been in a rhythm. So for him to get back out there, I did like how, I don't know if you could say it was a good thing or a bad thing when, he basically stopped the coach from celebrating. It's like, we're not there yet. This isn't it, and it's like puts things in perspective. We have a whole season to play. Don't get all, let's not do the hug thing right now and everything else. One thing that helps the Jets entirely is Miami's probably cooked at this point. So now it becomes a 2-team division. So I think that's going to help the Jets out a bunch. The one thing I've noticed with the Jets, though, they can't seem to get Garrett Wilson going, even though he had a touchdown this past week. He's not putting up big numbers. He's putting pedestrian numbers.
And it's interesting because you wonder if this is going to be pretty soon an A.J. Brown and Hurts situation where Wilson blows up at Rodgers because, let's face it, Rodgers, he's got his guy there, Alan Lazard. He brought him over from Green Bay. He didn't play well last year without Rodgers, but, Rodgers and him have that connection, and he's done a great job in terms of stepping it up this season. Had some good key plays in this one, had a huge touchdown for him, and the Jets are going to keep rolling along. The interesting thing with them is they have some games that are winnable and not coming up. So they have Denver. We'll see how they do there. They're going to play Minnesota over in England. That's going to be a fun one to watch. Then they have Buffalo on a Monday night, at Pittsburgh, at the Patriots again. Then they have Houston on a Thursday night. So some good games coming up, and we'll see if they're the real deal or not. The thing is I really like about the Jets is they're running the football with authority. They have a great 1-2 punch with Allen, who had 55 yards rushing, and then they also have the kid Braylon. So and Brees Hall. So the killer bees, I think they're calling them. They're really doing a good job up front. And then they got Oli Fasano in there now at the right tackle position because Morgan Moses got hurt. So good win for them. And we'll see if they're able to keep it going the next week as they're playing the Denver Broncos. Next game I want to touch on. This is crazy. We said, oh, Green Bay's season was over. Jordan Love got hurt. What are we going to do? Malik Willis, he's now 2-0 in terms of starting, and he gets his revenge. I know he said all the right things, but he got his revenge against the poor Tennessee Titans, who are 0-3, 30-14. This was a total domination, and we'll talk about Tennessee's quarterback in a minute. But what are you seeing in this one?
I'm looking at the fact now Tennessee might be the worst team in the NFL. But Green Bay, that's what you want to do with your backup quarterback. In a perfect world, your quarterback plays 17 games. I would say 90% of the time that's not going to happen. So what you need your backup quarterback to do is tread water, win a couple games while your starter's out. And that's exactly what Green Bay got out of that situation. So Jordan Love, whether he's back next week, the week after that, they got what they needed out of Malik Willis. Was it pretty all the time? Absolutely not. But he kept that team above water, and they're in a better position for him being the backup there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And, it was a good win for them. Green Bay has kept their season afloat. I'm hearing that Jordan Love is now practicing, and he's kind of on the side. They're going to kind of see, but they're probably – next week's going to be real interesting because they have Minnesota – and that's a game that everybody's kind of had circled on their calendar. We talked about Minnesota, where they've kind of turned the corner. We'll talk about their game in a minute. Just a big win for them. So Minnesota, somebody's had to go, and they emphatically did it. And you and I talked about we weren't sure if they were the real deal or not, but they just dominated Houston Texans 34-7. And the thing was, big win. C.J. Stroud never looked comfortable out there. He had 2 interceptions. Darnold, though, had 4 touchdowns to 4 different receivers. So talk to me about what Minnesota's doing. And they also had a good game from Aaron Jones.
I'm actually going to say I'm surprised. I mean, the fact that with Darnold playing the way he is, I thought Aaron Jones was on his way out, to be honest. And he's actually been resurrected out there with Minnesota. The one thing is their defense is playing great. Their defense is putting them in positions to, maybe squeak out a few games, but they're not squeaking them out. The offense is clicking too. So, I mean, Minnesota's been the most impressive team in my mind so far this season.
Yeah, definitely. It was a huge win for them, and Minnesota. We'll see if they're the real deal coming up, and the thing with them is, you just wonder. Their coach is pretty good, and he's got that defense playing. And the coach you really got to talk about is Brian Flores. Brian Flores has done a great job with that defense. They were just harassing C.J. Stroud like we haven't seen before, and he kind of looked frazzled. He looked like one of these young quarterbacks that really hadn't played against a big-time opponent. So talk about that defense. And Brian Flores, they forced 2 turnovers, allowed only 7 points. Do you think that Brian Flores will get another opportunity in the NFL to be a head coach?
I do, especially if Minnesota continues to do what they're doing this year. I mean, we've seen it in the NFL. We've seen it in other sports. It's like it's the circuit. It's like you sit there, you get a head coaching job. It doesn't work out. All right, I'm going to be coordinator again, and then your name kicks around again maybe in a year or two, especially if you're successful. So especially with all the bad teams and the coaching turnover that we have anymore, GMs don't have the patience anymore. You know why? Because the GM's going to lose his job. So I got to bring in the next, hot coordinator at that point. So I think he'll definitely get another shot.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting because, he has that lawsuit out there, and we'll see what happens there. But he's doing such a great job with his defense that's lost. He lost Danielle Hunter and some other guys, and he still has his role. And Greenland had 3 sacks and 3 forced fumbles in this. So, we're going to see against Green Bay, and if Love plays, if they're for real or not, coming up this week. But that was a fun one to talk about. We're here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. The next game I want to kind of touch on, and we talked about him earlier, is Caleb Williams kind of struggled in this one. And the Indianapolis Colts, kind of an ugly game to watch. I watched a lot of this. They won 21-16. Williams threw the ball 52 times in this game. The Bears have no running game whatsoever, and I just think, maybe they need an offensive-minded guy to help him. I'm not sure what Shane Waldron's doing in terms of that offense for the Bears. And then talk to me a little bit about the Colts. Richardson, 10 of 20, 2 interceptions. So he did not look the best either, but they'd be smart to just hand the ball off to Jonathan Taylor and keep it moving.
The thing that befuddles me on the whole thing with Chicago is you have a couple of running backs there. You have Swift, you have Khalil Herbert, who's shown potential in the past. You go to the Colts, they have like 4 wide receivers there that can, get open and get the ball to. I think you're looking at Caleb Williams. By the way, congrats to him for finally throwing a touchdown. Took him 3 weeks. He finally threw 2, though, so good for him. Also, with Richardson, you're looking at a guy who he's basically playing his rookie season right now. And he's showing the growing pains of that, I believe, also. It's going to be interesting to see if these guys remain in the starting roles, to see around week 10 how they've grown at that point.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting for Chicago because, they're going to be up and down. I like what Roma Dunzier did. He finally had a touchdown and over 100 yards. They didn't have, Keenan Allen with the heel injury, but they're a good, young, scrappy team. But I think without a rushing attack, it's going to be kind of tough for them. And you can see, as we talked about with these young quarterbacks, the NFL is hard, and he's so used to playing at USC where he's running around just making plays and can hold the ball all day. You only have so much time in the NFL before that pass rush gets to you. So we'll see how this goes. Big win for the Colts. They finally get off the schneid, and we'll see if they're able to move forward. There's so many teams at 1 and 2, and 1 and 2 is not a death sentence. So we'll see which one of those step forward. This was an interesting one, and I know we have a lot of listeners, and we're on in the Tampa area. What in the world happened to the Tampa Bay Bucks? At huge favorite at home. I think it was 6.5 point favorite. They let Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos come in there and just destroy them 26-7. It just shows you it's a week-to-week league, because the Bucks look so good the first 2 weeks. And this past week, they couldn't look even worse. Baker Mayfield only threw for 163 yards in this one. Can the Bucks bounce back? They got the Eagles coming up.
Yeah, I think the Bucks can bounce back. I think it's going to be another tightly, contested game, just like the Eagles-New Orleans game was contested. But you're looking at the Eagles now, on the road 2 weeks in a row? It's like you always see like a team that's on the road 2 weeks in a row. They usually don't win that second week. I think Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay is playing how they are. I mean, should they have lost to Denver? Probably not. But at the same time, it's like Tampa Bay is that team that's could squeak out their division with 10 wins. They're not someone who's going to win 14 games or anything like that. So there's going to be some ups and downs with them. Going back real quick to the rookie quarterbacks and the younger quarterbacks we were talking about with Richardson and Caleb Williams, I don't know how your feelings are on the movie Any Given Sunday. Oliver Stone movie, everything else. Some people like it, some people don't. I dug it, But the one thing in that movie that made the most sense to me is when Jamie Foxx, Steamin' Willie Beeman, gets in the game for the first time. And it's like he's talking to Pacino on the sideline. It's like it's moving so fast. It's moving so fast. And you just see this guy, it just flashes going by him. And that's what reminds me of these young quarterbacks. It's like it's just moving so fast right now until it slows down for them. But Tampa Bay, can they bounce back? Sure. In that division, New Orleans is a little bit of a surprise. Actually, you know what? It might not be that bad of a division now that we think about it. I was kind of putting it
crazy.
There. I mean, Carolina, I'll take them still out of the equation. But with Atlanta, New Orleans, and now Tampa, that could be a decent division now.
It can. And Tampa's got a lot of injuries, too. They didn't have Winfield Jr., they didn't have Vita Vea, and they had some other guys beat up. So it was a tough loss for them, especially at home. And it was just kind of surprising. And it was one of those 7 games where I talked about where these underdogs just stepped up. And, the NFL, there's just so much parity. And it's a good win for Denver. Talking about the game, you do got your tip your cap to Bo Nix in the Denver Broncos. He was 25 for 36, 216, no turnovers. He was able to run the football when needed. He was just efficient. And that defense, under Vance Joseph, they're a little better than people think. So we know Denver's not going to challenge for the AFC West or anything, but that's a good, solid win for them. We'll see if they're able to build upon that. The next game I want to talk about, and we talked about the quarterback, and I'm not even sure if it was his fault, but the Giants go into Cleveland, another upset. The Giants of all teams who look terrible other than the league neighbors. They went 21-15 in Cleveland. Big win for them. Daniel Jones, usually I kill him. This week he was good. He was efficient. 236 yards passing, 2 TDs. Are the Giants for real, or is this just an aberration?
Aberration. I don't think they're that good now. I think deep down they're a 6-7 win team max, and that's me being lenient with that. Yeah. Cleveland can't score, and that's the thing. It's like their defense literally has to hold teams under 17 points to give them a shot to win the game. And if they can't do that, they're going to lose to teams like the Giants.
Yeah, and it's like, wow. They can't run the foot. Ford had 10 rushes for 37 yards. So Nick Chubb, that was a devastating injury with that knee injury last year. Hopefully he can come back. But I kind of had that feeling that Cleveland was going to take that step back this season. They caught lightning in a bottle with Joe Flacco last year. And we talk about the Watson situation just swirling over this team. And I just don't see it going to change. They had Myles Garrett, got a little banged up in this game. He's a game wrecker. They did have Cooper finally hit the board for 7 catches for 86 yards and 2 TDs. And Nate had him on his bench, so he was not happy about that. But we'll see about Cleveland and if they're able to bounce back from this. But I see them firmly in the basement of the AFC North. And I think Cincinnati tonight will take a step forward and get that victory. The interesting thing about Cincinnati is they've started 0-2 the last 3 years. All right. We're here on Lloyd Vance Inside of Football here on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're going around the NFL Week 3. Seattle Seahawks 24-3 over Miami Dolphins. And the thing is, Skylar Thompson, who we knew didn't have a chance starting for Tua, he gets hit in the ribs and he gets knocked out, and then they're trotting out the backup, the third string quarterback, and they just have no chance. Miami Dolphins. They're talking about maybe signing. They signed Tyler Huntley. There's been talk of maybe trading for DTR from the Browns. Maybe Zach Wilson may be available from the Broncos. Is there any way that Miami can survive this? And I saw Tua on the sidelines. I'm already hearing from people in the Miami area that he wants to play again. Talk to me first about Tua. Should he play again? I know Nate and I talked about it last week, but I wanted to get your take on it, and then talk about this game and how Seattle dominated.
First, let's get a big bouquet of flowers for Geno Smith. Geno Smith's played well. You can't take anything away from him. He's done a good job this year for Seattle. That being said, back to Miami, they're done. There's nothing they can do. I mean, once again, going back to the fantasy perspective of it, I've got guys in leagues now trying to trade me Tyreek Hill. And for like a quarter on the dollar, but at the same time, I'm like, who's throwing him the ball? I don't need Tyreek Hill if nobody can throw him the ball. I will say that going back to the Tua situation, it's a serious situation. How many times have you seen it before? Kurt Warner had to take a couple years off being a backup and everything else because once you get those concussions, you're more susceptible to concussion. Ask Troy Aikman about that. His career went real quick after he started getting concussions. And at a certain point, it's easy for us to say, I mean, we're not in that man's shoes, so I can't make any comments for him. But you have that guaranteed money. You have the rest of your life. It's like, should he play? In my opinion, no. Is he going to? He's going to try, I think.
I think he is, and he has to sit out, I think, a minimum of 4 games, and we'll see how he's able to bounce back or not. And he needs to talk to his family and figure this thing out. And the thing is, the Dolphins have so many weapons, but they don't have a distributor of the football. And even if, say, okay, they bring in Zach Wilson or whoever, it's going to take him at least 3-4 weeks to learn the playbook and get acclimated and everything. So their season's on life support at 1 and 2, and I don't see that changing any bit. And Miami has a huge game coming up. Uh, it's actually a Monday Night Football. You always talk about, oh God, can't they flex out of this? It's going to be Miami and Tennessee
Oh,
next
God.
Monday. I know it's just terrible.
Ugh.
We're recapping week 3 here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Network. The Carolina Panthers. I did not see this coming, and I was on the show with Rich Quinones on his show on Coastal Sports Network, and we were talking about. He kept calling them the red water pistol. Well, let me tell you, Andy Dalton was the red rifle again. He was 26 of 37, 319, 3 TDs, no interceptions, and he stepped right in for Bryce Young, this old quarterback, and he showed that there's still some fight in Carolina Panthers. So talk to me a little about this one. And the Raiders, how do you lose at home to the Carolina Panthers, who just look so bad all year?
I'm going to take this from the gambling aspect of everything. Now, going to the Carolina Panthers, they were plus 5.5. I love the Panthers in this game. I didn't have the stones to pick them to win the game, but I loved them plus 5. I was like, change a quarterback, especially I guarantee you these guys have more confidence with Andy Dalton there than Bryce Young shaking in his shoes back there. That being said, though, going to the Raiders, it was Vegas. It was a dream for Vegas. You get the upset against Baltimore, and then next week, what do? They play Carolina. So everyone loads up on the Raiders to beat Carolina. Sure enough, they lose to Carolina. So it's just worked out that way. It was just like that was just fool's gold right there with that the Raiders team. You don't know what you're going to.
Yeah, and it's the Raiders got their win in week 2, and you're like, all right, maybe they can do something. But with Minshew and O'Connell, like we were just talking about with Jeff Little, who was on earlier, they're playing for next season in terms of getting the quarterback, and Pierce may have lost the locker room. Speaking of may have lost the locker room and teams kind of infighting, the Baltimore Ravens they needed a victory bad at 0-2. 0-3, your season's over because only 6 teams since 1980 have made the playoffs after starting 0-3. So Baltimore went down there and they ran the football with authority on the Dallas Cowboys. They bullied them and pushed them all around to the tune of 274 rushing yards. Derrick Henry was incredible in this game, 6 yards per carry, and then Lamar Jackson was efficient. So big win for them. Jackson now 21-1 versus NFC teams. Talked about from both sides of this. What are you thinking in terms of Baltimore and Dallas moving forward?
I think Baltimore, we talked about it a little bit earlier in the show, Baltimore had to win that game. There's no doubt about it. They had to win that game. I believe Baltimore was trying to do the same thing the Philadelphia Eagles were, getting older running backs with a little tread off the tires. I think they were trying to limit their carries, and you could tell by the first couple weeks. But now I think both teams are in the same situation is, what are we saving these guys for if we can't make the playoffs? So they're in situations where they have to feed these guys now. And it's like you're going to see what you have come late November, early December. On the flip side of that, Dallas, they're not that good. They're just not that good. And now you locked up your receiver, you locked up your quarterback, and they're just not a good team. It's like the joke is a star on the side of the helmet for Dallas. It's not an emblem. It's a rating. They're a 1-star team. That's all it is.
It's crazy, Kevin, because with the Dallas Cowboys, yes, they have stars with C.D. Lamb and Dak Prescott and Micah Parsons on defense. They have some star players, but it's the second-tier guys and then just the regular lunch pail guys they do not have on this roster. They're not making plays, and they've started infighting. Dexter Lawrence on the team, he was yelling at guys. Micah Parsons was kind of hitting around at guys, quit. I know as an Eagles fan, you got the big smile on your face because I think it's getting ready to implode, just like I thought going into the season with Dallas. And it all starts with Jerry Jones as an 81. You can be the owner, but you cannot be the general manager and the architect of the team. This team is in disarray. And yes, they probably should win the next game coming up. They're playing on Thursday night against the Giants. I mean, if they can't beat the Giants, they got problems. But they have at the Giants, at the Steelers, so that's that back-to-back that you were talking about, road games. Then they have Detroit, and then they finally have their bye, and then at San Francisco. So Dallas has got to get together, but it's not looking good in Big D. And I know all their fans say, "Oh, this is our year. This is our year." Well, it's another season without a trophy in the cupboard for Cowboys fans. Last game I want to talk about here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network, is everybody's saying this. I wanted to get your take on it. Kansas City wins 22-17 against Atlanta, but people are saying once again it's the Jordan rules for Patrick Mahomes. The refs are helping him. What are you thinking about all this, Kevin?
I think winning multiple Super Bowls gets you some calls, most definitely. I think you're the big name that creates ratings for their TV, that for the advertising dollars. So they getting some calls? Absolutely, they're getting some calls. At the same time, though, you can't make mistakes against that team either. You have to go out and beat that team. You can't put yourself in a situation where the refs can make that call. So it goes both ways. Do I think they're getting some calls? Oh, yeah. There's no doubt they're getting some calls, but are they earned? Absolutely.
Yeah, and the thing is with the Chiefs, they're winning in spite of Mahomes. He's got 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He's not looked at efficient. Yeah, he's getting the ball to Rice, but Kelsey's name really has not been called much, and their defense has been a calling card with Steve Spagnuolo, guys like Bolton and the rest of that defense, Karlaftis, Latest, they're doing a great job. So, big win for them. They're 3-0, and like the old Patriots teams, they don't care about style points. They're just stacking wins and moving forward. So Kansas City, we'll see how they continue. But they have the bullseye on their back, and everybody's going to be coming after them. We talked with Jeff. They're at the Chargers this week. They have New Orleans on a Monday night, week 5. Then they get their bye. And then they're at San Francisco, at the Raiders, at Tampa. Then they host Tampa Bay. So the mix of winnable and non-winnable games there. But as long as they have Mahomes and Andy Reid, this veteran group that's been there before, they should be all right. And then they have Carson Steele, who's kind of running the football. We'll see if he's able to hold the fort down until they can get back Pacheco. So, but I do agree with you. It's like the Jordan rules. So once you get that level of success, obviously – you're going to get the benefit of the doubt. But I don't think the games are fixed or anything like that. One of my emailers always kind of tries to allude to that. Just stop. It's too hard to do all that. So here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football, each week Kevin and I pick our game ball winners and our lackey. So I'll start with you, Kevin. Who is your game ball winner for week 3 around the National Football League?
Game ball winner for week 3. It's got to be Darnold. It does. 4 touchdowns. Your team's undefeated, especially because I've blasted USC quarterbacks. I have to eat it a little bit and give it to Sam.
Yeah, Sam had a great game. We'll see if he's able to keep it going for the Vikings, and they're undefeated. So my game ball winner is Derrick Henry. I mean, he was just incredible. The first 2 games, he only had 32 touches. This week, the Ravens said, you know what? We're going to work to our strengths. We're going to run behind Ronnie Stanley and Linderbaum. 25 rushes for Henry for a thundering 151 yards, 6 yards per carry, 2 TDs. He even caught a pass. A lot of people said, oh, he doesn't catch passes. Baltimore just dominated the Cowboys at the line of scrimmage for 274 yards, and he was the engine. So he gets my game ball. Who is your lackey for this week? This is a guy that could not get it done or just a big pain.
I'm going to go for a game that's being played right now. Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Ooh. I'm not saving it for next week. Let me get it out now. The game's at halftime. Down by 30-plus points at halftime. Your team's 0-2. I know you're on the road. You're in Buffalo. But you gotta show up for that game. There's no excuses to be getting routed like that, and that falls on Dougie P at the same time. They're not getting it done, and then you've thrown all this sack of loot at Trevor Lawrence at the same time.
Yeah, and it's interesting because their owner, Shad Khan, he's another one of these impatient owners, and you wonder how much longer Doug Peterson's will be able to last there, as bad as his team's playing. 0-3. And as you said, the lackey usually comes from a team that's downtrodden. This team as well, 0-3. I got to give it to quarterback Will Levis from the Tennessee Titans. He is terrible. I mean, you're talking about a bad quarterback. And how is he even a starter in National Football League? 26 of 34, okay. But he had 2 more interceptions, including a pick 6. And he was outplayed by Malik Willis, the guy they got rid of him to give the starting job to. So I gave it to Will Levis. I don't think he's going to get any better. It may be time for Mason Rudolph there with the Titans.
Ugh. Oh, God.
Just be glad you're not a Titans fan. I think it's going to be a very, very long season for them. We know the Detroit Lions finished 0-16 in 2008. I don't think it's going to be that bad. I think they'll get a win somewhere or something, but it's going to be a long season for the Titans and their new head coach, Callahan. So those are our game ball winners and lackeys for this week. Here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football, we're going to kind of transition and move over to week 4, and Kevin and I will kind of give our picks, see where we are with all that going into week 4. Another big week around the NFL, and as we get closer to Halloween and all that, I think we will get a definitive look at who's in the driver's seat, not driver's seat, who's a fraud, who's not. But right now, as Kevin said earlier when we first came on, it's so open around the National Football League. All right, Thursday night, Dallas Cowboys are at the New York Giants. I think Dallas will win this one. They're notorious for beating up bad teams, putting up big points, and then thumping their chest. But, in games that matter, they always kind of seem to come up short. So what are you thinking Thursday night, Dallas and the New York Giants?
This should be an easy Dallas win, even though usually a division game's a little closer and everything else. Dallas' season's over if they lose this game. That's another, the Ravens were in the reverse position last week. Dallas has to win this game. And you're absolutely right. Dak's going to throw 3 or 4 touchdowns. They'll run the score up probably if they get the opportunity and hang 50. And they'll pound their chest until they play a team that's better than them and they lose again. But, yeah, this game has Dallas written all over it.
Yeah, and it'll set up things. Interestingly, they go to Pittsburgh the following week on Sunday Night Football, and that Steelers defense has got to be licking their chops looking at Dallas's offensive line is not what it used to be. That offensive line used to be one of the cornerstones around the NFL, and other than Zach Martin, they're not blocking a lot of people. And with T.J. Watt, that's going to be a tough matchup. But I do agree with you that this upcoming week, that Dallas should thump the Giants pretty good. And let's not forget, the Giants won last week. Daniel Jones looked great. Well, now the roller coaster end of that, he'll probably have a bad week this week and throw a couple picks, a couple fumbles. So we both agree on Dallas Cowboys. The New Orleans Saints, who, everybody was talking about them, high-powered, 91 points. Well, the Eagles kind of shut them down, 15-12. They're going to the Atlanta Falcons. Both these teams just played the Eagles. I would always say go with the better quarterback. I think I'm going to go with the Atlanta Falcons this one. I think the Eagles kind of showed some flaws with the New Orleans Saints, so I'm going to go with the Falcons.
I agree with you. I think Atlanta's got something cooking right now. I think they're getting comfortable with each other. I think New Orleans, we said earlier, it's like they beat Carolina and Dallas we don't think is a good football team. So what did they really show? It's like you ran some numbers up on some bad teams. I think Kirk Cousins has Atlanta moving right now, and I think they're just going to get better. I think they're really just hitting their stride right now.
Yeah, and their defense better than people with Judon and Jesse Bates. So I think Raheem Moore's building some things. They lost a tough one this week, but I think that's going to be a big, huge divisional battle, and it's a good bounce-back game for them. So we'll see. This is a big game in the NFC North I want to go over. The Minnesota Vikings 3-0. They're at the Green Bay Packers. Let's, for all purposes, we'll say Jordan Love gets out there. I saw him warming up and everything. I think he's kind of pinpointed this game to come back for. Huge game for Sam Darnold. Is he the old Sam Darnold was throwing interceptions or 4 teams, etc.? I think he's the new Sam Darnold. I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to go to Green Bay and kind of surprise them. Now, the thing is, the Green Bay Packers, their defense has a lot of teeth. They've had 8 sacks last week. They were just all over Will Levis.
I think this game has under written all over it. Both teams' defenses are really coming on right now. I like the revenge factor for Aaron Jones. I like him going to Green Bay and wanting to show up a little bit. I agree with you with the new Sam Darnold right now because they're playing to his strengths. They're not making him go out there and throw buckshot all over the field. Throw passes everywhere. Sometimes it goes to our guy. Sometimes it goes to the other guy. So I like Minnesota in this game, but I like the under.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, like it. All right, we'll keep jumping around. I know not much time left here. Lloyd Vance Insider Football. The Denver Broncos, who got the surprise win, Bo Nix. But I think the carpet ride's going to kind of end. Maybe he had a great week, but the Denver Broncos are traveling across the country to face the New York Jets, who want to really establish themselves out. Aaron Rodgers, last week he looked comfortable in the pocket, and I think Denver, as well as their defense, played, as I said, the roller coaster. This week, Bo Nix, a rookie quarterback, going against a defense with a lot of teeth. I'm going with the Jets.
I have to go with the Jets as well in that game. I think it's set up for the Jets. I wouldn't say easy ones, but pad up the win total here a little bit with some of the schedule they have going on. And Aaron Rodgers knows enough from being in Green Bay that these are games you need to win. He's used to being in situations where you have to get these early wins against teams that are inferior to you to make your move at the end of the season. So I don't see Denver putting up that much of a battle against the Jets.
Yeah. This next game we were kind of previewed earlier. The Philadelphia Eagles, they're very banged up. Their receivers, their offensive line, really not sure about Smith, who got hit. I meant to get your opinion on that. We'll get that in a second. The Eagles traveled to Tampa Bay in a huge game. Jalen Hurts has got to step up in this one. Saquon's going to do all he can, but Tampa Bay's probably going to be angry after that loss this week. So talk about the Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And what did you think of that hit on Devontae Smith? And was that dirty, playing to the whistle, etc.?
There are a few questionable hits in that game. Darius Slay was involved in some things at the end, and Devontae Smith as well. Do I think it was a dirty hit? It was a bit much. It was a bit much. I'm not one of those guys who's going to say this was dirty, that was dirty, unless Perfect for Cincinnati was out there. That's the only time I'll say something's dirty. But yeah, it was excessive. There's no doubt about it. Eagles are in a spot right now because if they want to rest A.J. Brown for another week, trying to crawl into that bye week right now, your big acquisition, Mr. Dotson, there has 3 receptions in 2 games, or 3 games now, I should say. So he's not really, he was your third receiver. He was the guy coming in supposed to do something for you, They're running, and Britton Covey, I think, is banged up now as well. So who's catching the ball for this team, right? Unless Goddard's going to get like 10 receptions right now. You know what it's going to mean? Barkley's getting 25 carries. That's what it means.
Yeah, and maybe they could sign Julio Jones again off this scrap heap last year. They brought him in. I don't know how much he has left. There's got to be some receivers out there, somebody they can Hunter Renfrow or somebody they can bring in here because they need some bodies. As you said, they got injuries all over their receiving core. Somehow, though, with this Eagles team, this is a revenge game against Tampa. I think they're going to find a way to win. I had a weird feeling this Saints game about them pulling out. I think they're going to be able to pull it out against Tampa Bay, too.
I'm going to go with the old second week in a row on the road. It's hard to win 2 weeks in a row on the road. And I think Tampa Bay, squeaks by them in this one. It's something like, it's going to be some weird, like 22-17. There's going to be something weird going on, but I think Tampa gets them up this week.
Yeah. All right, last game we'll talk about here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football for this week. And coming up, the Buffalo Bills on Sunday Night Football are at the Baltimore Ravens. And we're seeing the Bills just dominate Jacksonville. I think the Ravens, though, at home are just too tough. I think they beat Josh Allen and them in Week 4.
I think it's set up for Baltimore to make this as a statement win. Buffalo, by the looks of everything, they're going to be resting everyone halfway through the third quarter. So these guys are going to be sitting for a little bit. At least they're going to get some rest. But this is a statement win from Baltimore. If they can come back and win that, they can show that we're a part of this AFC elite. Now, in turn, if they lose this game, things just got a lot more difficult for Lamar and company, that's for sure.
Yeah. Another great week here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.90 Game and Coast Sports Network. We want to thank Jeff Lodel for popping on from Sports Journey. Check him out. Great job behind the glass, Angel. And we will talk to you next week on Lloyd Vance Insider Football.